Very emotional, but a time for the community to come together. Just look at this, all the outpouring of love and support from the community, written in letters. There's a lot of debris on the road. If you take a look behind me, you can see some trees that knocked over during yesterday's tornado. The worst damage is probably over here. You can see this pole that fell over. We just heard some prayers a few minutes ago praying over the officers. It's also very emotional too. If you just look, you see officers over here on the left. It's awful. First, the arsonist set this daycare bus on fire, and as you can see, it's just destroyed. The activist tells me she wanted to send a message by having the words Black Lives Matter painted around a Confederate general's gravesite. I found out a family was actually inside this house when the wind tore off the roof, and as you can see, everything is scattered. This is where he was standing when the shooting happened. The bullets went through this window right here, and they didn't stop. If you take a look over here, you can see several bullet holes. You see about 1, 2, 3 of them, and then there's also one in the closet, and luckily the mother was able to grab him and leave. I actually spoke to a man who lives a few doors down, and he says that he was inside his home when the winds were picking up. He looked out the window and saw debris flying towards his face. I've never seen anything like it. Just very overwhelming. As the police cars drove by, the family members held on to each other for support. Just that raw emotion, it just really gets you. And now everything's quiet down. It's just more solemn because of this. You see all of the candles left over from the vigil honoring Officer Wallace. Family members surround the son of a fallen officer, a 9-year-old boy who misses his father very much. Dozens gathered to honor Officer Travis Wallace, a policeman shot in the line of duty while trying to stop a suspect last night.
I love him like a son, but I know I'm the uncle. And right now we all are grieving.
Not just an uncle, but a mentor who encouraged Wallace to become a policeman. Wallace served for 5 years. He's described as very motivated. His goal, to become police chief one day.
I'd like him to be remembered as he was, a hero, a person that was helping people. I don't mean a zero standing on the sideline. We in the front lines of the action.
Praise you now. We give you glory. God, we give you honor and we give you praise. God,
the prayers, candles, flashing police lights, and row of officers was overwhelming for the family. His sister barely held it together.
Travis was so well loved, just so many people, and this hurts. I can't describe the pain that me and my family are going through.
A family grieving, but still proud of Officer Wallace for protecting his community, doing what he loved most.
This was hard. This is hard. But he was doing what he loved, and that was protecting and serving. And that gives us some solace.
The family tells me Wallace planned on celebrating his son's 10th birthday next month, and I'm told the family will continue to raise his son and keep his father's memory alive. Reporting live in Helena, West Helena, Jacque Masse, Fox 13 News.
The church is not the building, it's us. We are the church.
A historic church filled with strong people in North Nashville. For the second time, Pastor Derek Moore is picking up the pieces after a tornado damaged Hopewell Baptist Church.
That's from where we had storm damage before, and they replaced it.
It stood on 10th Avenue since 1878. Pastor Moore had hoped his building was spared.
I just could not believe the amount of damage that we experienced.
Farther down the street, neighbors stepped out of their homes, taking everything in.
The windows were shaking so bad, and it's like it was just the house was going to explode.
Milton Bryant says he hid in his bathroom with some friends for what felt like hours.
I'm like, Lord, please help us. Help us. We was praying and we was crying.
He's lived in the area for about 10 years. Now he can hardly recognize it. But there is hope. After the storm, there are helping hands, giving Bryant and Pastor Moore faith that things will get better.
We just appreciate all the prayers and support of the community. We've had a number of people who've passed by and who've offered a great deal of support.
Again, when I was driving around this area, I was just speechless looking at those homes, barely standing up and seeing everybody just very upset while volunteers are helping them. And I'm told that there's about 10 to 20 volunteers from the Red Cross chapter in Memphis that traveled all the way over to Putnam County in Nashville to help set up shelters and hand out food, just to do anything they can to help these people in need. Reporting live in Putnam County, Jacque Masse, Fox 13 News. From the moment Dr. Threlkeld wakes up, he tells me he is thinking about the coronavirus, answering phone calls, treating patients, and doing research. Despite his personal struggles and sacrifices, he always puts others first.
And I remember turning to my wife and daughter saying, your lives are about to change for the worse considerably. I never dreamed it would be for a year.
Just one phone call changed Dr. Steve Threlkeld's life forever. That call in early March 2020 from Baptist Hospital announced the arrival of the coronavirus in Memphis.
Hang in there, good to see you.
From that moment on, he began working overtime, sometimes 18 hours a day, often arriving at the hospital at 7 a.m. and not leaving until 1 the next morning.
You just had to go as long as you could go and then go sleep and come back. And so there wasn't a lot of time for recreation or even sometimes to catch your thoughts.
No time to reflect or even decompress, constantly thinking about COVID-19. He's an infectious disease specialist, so he spends countless hours researching and answering questions. A tough task, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when information was limited.
You have to answer questions for which there may be no clear answer. And so it really comes down to judgment. And when you're making judgment that affects the lives of other people.
But through it all, despite these obstacles, Dr. Threlkeld wakes up with a positive attitude. He makes every moment count, whether it's feeding his dog or answering a quick question about COVID from a family member or friend.
I'm as I describe myself, a pathological optimist. So I think every day is going to be a great day. A lot of times it doesn't work out like that.
He's quick to add he is not an army of one. He works closely with his brother and 4 others on the infectious disease specialist team at Baptist. Co-workers he can lean on for emotional support.
We all go until we all are finished. Is how we do things in our group. And
when he isn't working with his team, you can find him answering questions from reporters 3 times a week.
It's one of the key questions, to be sure.
His second job is to keep the public aware of what's going on in the fight against COVID-19. That has left little time for his family, making moments spent with his wife limited but precious.
And my wife would bring me dinner at the hospital for days on end, and some days that's the only time I saw her. Yeah, it's been really bad. Thankfully, I married very well. It was, marrying my wife was the best thing I ever did. And
Dr. Threlkeld says it's hard feeling sorry for himself when he's seen the ravaging effects of the pandemic. He's lost more than sleep. He's lost friends, even his minister.
But when you had people close in your life get really sick and die, it brings it home in a way that you can't otherwise imagine. There's something about kids losing parents that's the hardest for me, and that happened a few times. I mean,
those are the times when he leans on his faith.
I think without it, I just don't see how it's possible not to think that there's some sort of higher purpose behind this and the other suffering that we have, because there was a lot of suffering, there really was.
Dr. Threlkeld believes there is a light at the end of the tunnel. He is thankful for vaccines and is seeing fewer COVID patients. Still, he warns the pandemic is not over yet.
It's a year you can't get back, and you hope you've done something, to be worthwhile during that year to try to help people. But, it's a year where you don't get to see your family much, and everything else was put on hold.
Dr. Threlkeld says once this is all over, he just wants to take a vacation with his family. He says he is thankful for the opportunity to serve his community.